is Tucker Schreiber, and I'm a product manager at Shopify.
Awesome. So you are a product manager because you helped come up with the Frenzy app program. Can you tell us a bit about how you came up with that idea?
Yeah, of course. So Frenzy is a mobile marketplace, and it's the first of its kind. It's specifically for limited edition products that are highly sought after. And the way that we came up with this idea for this app was we saw this interesting difference between the way that people were buying today and the way that merchants were selling these products. Where at Shopify, we saw a lot of checkouts were actually being completed on mobile devices. And we said, why don't we create an app or a tool that merchants and their consumers can use that reduces a lot of the friction in the sale and purchase of these products. And it was about a year ago almost that the idea sort of came to be. And since then, this small team has been working on it for almost a year now, and we're really excited about what the future of Frenzy looks like.
That's awesome. So you were here at Shopify before Frenzy existed.
That's right.
What were you doing here?
So I joined Shopify in May of 2014, and I joined as a customer support guru. So I was on the front of the lines, speaking to merchants every day, helping them set up their stores, helping them with any issues that they have running their business. And I did that for about 6.5 months. And then I joined the growth team here in Toronto. And I was working on the content marketing team, writing content that educates, informs, and really just helps entrepreneurs get started or helps existing entrepreneurs grow their business. And then about a year ago now, I joined the product management team. And Frenzy's been my baby, and it's been the thing that I've been most excited about, and I consider myself super fortunate to be able to be working on that and to have all the resources in the world to make something like Frenzy come to life at Shopify.
That's awesome. So I'd love to actually find out more about how Frenzy came to life. So intrapreneurship, we find, is people inside companies who have these really great ideas and are able to build them into full-blown ideas, products, sort of exactly like how you did that. So how did you approach the people here at Shopify when you had this idea?
Yeah, so I think a common misconception is that it was just sort of overnight, like, oh, we're going to build Frenzy. But it was actually a lot of preparation and meetings with different stakeholders internally, and really talking about the idea as much as I could to engineering teams, designers, and our executive team. So it probably took about 3 or 4 months of just putting my idea down on paper, doing early stage mock-ups that I was doing myself, just wireframes, and really doing a lot of research into the potential market size for a product like this. And it was around last May or so that I actually wrote up a really big brief that was maybe, I don't know, anywhere from 500 to 1,000 words that just outlined everything that this app could be. And I shared it just on an internal tool that we use called Slack to get as much feedback as I could from basically anybody that was willing to give it to me. And something that Shopify does every quarter or so is Hack Days, which is 2 days every quarter that everybody in the company takes off of their regular duties to work on a creative project. And right around June of last year, so right after May when I was sort of sharing this project with everybody, Hack Days was coming up. And that was the perfect opportunity for me to say, okay, a lot of people are going to be thinking about creative projects. I have this idea that I really want to work on. Why don't I see if I can get other people involved and make this actually come to life? So myself and a team of engineers, designers, interns, and mobile developers all got together here in Toronto last June. And over the course of 2 days, we built an early prototype of Frenzy and presented it in front of the entire company after the end of the second day. And from there, we ended up actually winning Hack Days, which was great validation for us to say, okay, if people internally think this is a great idea, maybe we should continue moving forward with it. And that's what we did.
That's awesome. So did you find you had a lot of support from the higher-ups here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that Shopify does a really good job of is supporting these types of experimental initiatives. So we actually have a group here in Toronto that operates under an umbrella term called Garage, which is this idea of high-risk, high-reward products that we can build in a very short amount of time and launch them to the public to see if there's any traction there. So that's where Frenzy came out of. It came out of our Garage group, which the mandate for that was build something quickly, make sure it's a super high risk, make sure you're betting everything on this, and see if it works. And the other great thing about building something like this at Shopify is many of our executive team and people that are higher up in the company have entrepreneurial backgrounds, and at one point were a founder themselves. So I think that they really have this good understanding of who it is in the company that can help push this idea of entrepreneurship forward at Shopify. So there was not really any friction in terms of getting this started.
That's super awesome to hear, and actually sort of leads us really well into my next sort of lineup of questions, a little more broad here, if you will. So Shopify seems to be pretty good at this, but why do you think it's important that established companies continue to innovate?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, from what I've seen from other companies and companies like Shopify, if you're not trying to disrupt yourself, somebody else will. So the way that we think about Frenzy is it's almost this act of self-disruption where the goal is for Frenzy to someday be bigger than Shopify. So take down all the banners internally, take off the sign on the front of the building, and switch it out to be a Frenzy logo. And I think that's it's very easy for companies to say, we're going to do experimental things like this. We believe in entrepreneurship. But I think, if companies aren't actually doing it actively, they risk having, a couple of friends in a garage build something in 6 months that can eat up their entire business. And I think that if companies aren't willing to bet on projects like Frenzy, then that'll happen much sooner than I think they would presume.
That's good. That's actually a fantastic answer. So when people are doing things like this, it seems like you had a pretty interesting path for how Frenzy came about. But what do you think are some of the biggest hurdles that entrepreneurs are going to encounter along their way? Or maybe what are some of the ones you encountered?
Yeah, I think, so one thing that we definitely encounter with Frenzy is just getting the entire organization to understand what it is that we're trying to achieve. At a company like Shopify that's so large, we really take craftsmanship very seriously, and we know that if we're going to launch something, it'll potentially be seen by our 400,000 merchants that are within the Shopify ecosystem and the thousands of partners that exist within the Shopify ecosystem as well. So with Frenzy, when we were saying, we're going to bypass a lot of the technical reviews that we typically go through, we're going to bypass a lot of the design reviews that we go through, we're just going to run as quickly as we can, be super scrappy, super resourceful. There was some questions around, is this what we want to be shipping as the first version of this? Is this something that, people will actually play with? Will merchants be interested in this because it was thrown together so quickly? And what we found was, if we had have taken a year and a half or a year or 2 years to build and launch this, we wouldn't be able to gather as much feedback as we're getting right now from consumers and retailers as well about how to continue to improve the product. The other hurdles that I think, that I went through personally is just, it is kind of lonely being one of the only teams at the time that was working on projects that were examples of entrepreneurship. So the struggles that I faced being a product manager were in some cases much different than what our other product managers would face at Shopify, where I was lucky enough to have all the support in the world from our executive team to just say, do whatever you want. But with that comes a lot of responsibility to actually make it work. So it's super challenging and a lot of fun. And I'm just grateful for the fact that I get to keep working on this.
That's awesome. And you seem to get through it well. And you like you said, you did a couple other things here before Frenzy sort of came about. What skills would you say helped you the most? And what do you think are skills that entrepreneurs should have?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So I think one of the things that's also not so obvious about the work that we're doing with Frenzy and myself and the way that it sort of came to be was I've always been interested in starting something on my own. So part of the reason why I actually ended up working at Shopify is all throughout high school and university, I was starting my own Shopify stores. I was doing whatever I could to learn about what it actually meant to start something on your own. And I think that entrepreneurship starts with people that have a founder's mentality that say, I want to start something on my own. I want to work with a group of multidisciplinary people and see if we can build something that can change the future of commerce or whatever retail industry or whatever industry that they're working in. I think the other thing that maybe in some ways works against me, but I think has worked to our benefit for quite a bit so far, is I'm not afraid to bend the rules a little bit, which, might get some people a little bit annoyed with me sometimes, but it is the thing that I think has been the driving force behind getting Frenzy to where it is today so quickly. And that is, like I said, maybe not doing all the code reviews we should have been doing in the early stages, and not doing all the design reviews we were doing in the early stages, and just really saying, this is the vision that our team has. We have a certain amount of time to execute on that and ship it out the door as quickly as we can. And lastly, I think, something that I try and be super self-aware of is I don't take myself very seriously, but I take my work very seriously. So I think that in terms of the team that we're working with on Frenzy, they appreciate that a lot, where we can be friends outside of work, we can go out to dinner and all that sort of stuff, and they don't feel like I'm their boss in any way. But on the flip side of that, when it's time to get work done, we really double down and say, okay, this is serious, we have to get this done. So I think that there's a couple different things there at play that have worked to my benefit and Shopify's benefit for sure.
Awesome. So I guess one of my last questions I have for you is, Shopify seems to be pretty supportive of you, of Frenzy, of other people sort of doing their own things. Maybe you can give us some examples from Shopify as well, but how do you think companies can create cultures like this that sort of encourage innovation and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think, the best example that I can think of specifically here at Shopify, and I know other companies do it as well, is Hack Days. It really is this conscious effort from our CEO, Toby, has been ingrained in Shopify since I think day one, which is, we know that everybody wants to have some sort of creative outlet, and that's, that could be anything from building Frenzy to building a better internal tool to measure people's daily caloric intake when they're eating our lunch and stuff. So it's really, I think, it comes from top down to say, like, we have the resources and the people to make this work. Let's do everything we can to support these creative individuals to help them, disrupt themselves in some way. And I think the other thing that's important is, I listen to a lot of podcasts from Silicon Valley and in Toronto and stuff. And you always hear about companies as big as Shopify or bigger that say that they do this stuff. But I think, it really does take a culture like Shopify to actually make it happen, where we are super supportive in terms of, just trying things and failing. If something doesn't work out, that's okay. You probably learned a ton from it that you can apply to your next project. The other thing that we love to support here at Shopify is just getting shit done as quickly as we can. And that is something that I think a lot of people really lean on when they're working on projects here that are more entrepreneurial, where they say, we don't have to build this for the long term. All we want to do is get this out the door and see if people use it and see if there's any traction there. And then at that point, you can pour a bunch of resources behind it and really turn it into a massive, massive product. And that's what we hope to do with Frenzy, and I really hope that someday Frenzy could go public itself, just like Shopify did.
That's awesome. This has been fantastic, man. Any last words of wisdom you'd like to pass on to other entrepreneurs out there?
Yeah, I think, it's definitely not easy being one of the few people that is acting in this sort of entrepreneurship world. But I think there are plenty of resources internally or externally. There's plenty of other companies that are trying to do something like this. And one thing that I found to be super valuable is find a mentor externally, maybe not at your organization, that has gone through the same type of thing, and just lean on them for advice, have coffee with them. A lot of people are willing to share their stories, and I think that that's what helped me the most for sure.
That's awesome. That's great, man. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool.